Good afternoon, noontime, everyone. It is Thursday, so we are here for Voices of Resilience. And my name is Nathan Hofer. I'm the Director of Campus Operations with the Lost and Found Association. And if you've never heard of Lost and Found, but you're here anyways, awesome. Welcome to the party. Uh, but we are an organization that focuses on mental health in young adults. We focus on building resiliency and other preventative mental health factors that really develop skills and tools for young adults to handle the hardships that happen in life. I mean, we can all admit that we've had some fun curveballs thrown our way this last year, to say the least. And we want to make sure that as we continue through life, that you can always learn to be more resilient. You can always gain those skills. So we focus in on developing those and just supporting mental health for young adults, so we can hopefully live in a day where self-harm and suicide is not a thing anyone considers. I'd love to work myself out of a job. I say that every week, probably. It'd be great to work myself out of a job. But anyways, that's not why we're here. We're here today. Try this centered. We're here today to have our Voices of Resilience discussion with Ryan Allen. I think Ryan has been one of the most longtime supporters of Lost and Found, and he works with Lumen Therapy as an educator down in Iowa. He's just awesome. So hopefully you've seen some of our yoga sessions that he's done online here and partook of those. But if not, I'll let Ryan introduce himself. But I just want to say one more time, I'm super pumped to have you on, Ryan. This is awesome. You've been a supporter of Lost and Found for a very long time, which is great for us.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm Ryan Allen. I'm a professor of English and writing at Briarcliff University down here in Sioux City, Iowa. But I'm also, like Nathan said, the co-owner of Lumen Therapy, and we provide therapy and education, working primarily with at-risk and underserved, underrepresented populations, individuals with trauma, and also working in this case especially to really work to build resilience. And so that's at the heart of what we do. And so we're so excited to have an opportunity to talk with you all today and to share some of our story and some of our ideas about how we can, especially like Nathan said, in this time full of curveballs almost every day, be resilient and control what we can control.
Full of curveballs, isn't that the truth? I'll tell you what.
You're being really generous about it. I think that's not what I would probably be a little harsher. So you're being nice. That's
yeah,
good. That's
good. We're on a live cast. I probably should.
Yeah, totally.
Because there's things I would say. There's things I know. I saw a post the other day. I'm an avid Office fan, and it made me laugh so hard I started crying. But it was if you've seen The Office and it's the episode when Kevin's carrying his chili, and he like brings it to the office and spills it. And it's like a picture of December 30th, 2019. It's him walking in carrying the chili. And I just started laughing. I'm like, that is the most apt description of everything I've ever seen.
Absolutely. It's a daily chili spill. Oh
my gosh. Yep. Mm-hmm. That's the kind way to say it. Other words we could use, but we won't. This is a family cast. That's
right.
Anyways, Ryan, so you shared kind of your background here. So you connect with young adults in multiple facets of your life. But outside of that, I know you work with youth, you work with adults. So you're really focused on self-care, self-awareness. And I know we had an opportunity back in, March, April, May, I don't even remember when it was, where we did several weeks of yoga nidra online with you, which was very cool. But how is that, all this focus on your self-care, you said you work at Briarcliff, how do all those things tie together? And this current season, like I said, how have you been able to maintain your focus and still, focus on the things that are important to you when everything else is kind of falling down?
I think those are some great questions, and I think we're all asking ourselves and trying to figure out our way and navigate our way through those questions right now. I think first and foremost, I have to be always honest and as transparent as possible. Like these last few months it's like the best of times and the worst of times. It's been, even in its best moments, there's still an underlying trauma that's going on right now. And it's the trauma of it, at the very least, uncertainty. And at the heart of when we talk about trauma-informed care, we always want to focus on, safety and predictability and control. And at the heart of in connecting it to what you're saying about taking care of ourselves, we have to do those things that are going to promote those core tenets of feeling safe, knowing kind of what's going to happen next, and then being able to exert some mode of control over that. And so in this climate, unfortunately, there's so little that we can actually control. There are so many great big forces out there. And I think maybe the younger you are, the bigger the forces may seem, or I don't know on that one. I think it may just depend. But I think that we say as often as we can, you have to watch out for number one, or you're going to step in number two. And I think that because at the heart of it, that's really all we can do. That's really all we can do. We can't control what the schools are going to do. We can't control what the governments are going to do. We can only control what we're going to do and how we're going to respond to things. And so if we're, as the vessel, not strong, if we're, and certainly from a public health standpoint, like what's the best thing we can do for ourselves is to stay healthy, is to maintain all those self-care practices that we were doing pre-pandemic, and even taking more time, more energy. This isn't the time to do less care for ourselves. This is the time to put in more time, more energy, because kind of the forces culturally, societally are working against us. And it's not just with regards to COVID. I mean, it's the unrest in the streets. It's the state of race in our country and how we relate to one another. I mean, this pandemic is not, it's not the cause of all this. It's another symptom. And so there's deeper rooted issues that are going on and that are big. And we have to, it's our part, especially as those of us who work with individuals, with young people, our responsibility as teachers, as educators, as providers, coaches, mentors, whatever role we're playing, is to understand fundamentally that young people are plugging into us. The developing brain is always looking for adults. Every adult they encounter, they're plugging in to them and getting their sense of their energy. And so we've got to be, as adults, as providers, our self-care practices have to be so important and so primal to our everyday practice, our everyday care. And in doing so, that's not us being selfish. That's actually the highest good that we can do, because as we're healthy, the kids who we love and serve, whether they're our own or in classrooms or wherever, they're going to feel that. And then it doesn't matter really what the academics or the curriculum or any of that, that'll come. But we know that the brain in pain does not learn, and the brain in pain can't teach either. And so we've got to do a lot of work. It's going to be, in Iowa, I mean, I know in other places too, close to us, we're all starting here in the next couple of weeks. And like we have students, our first really at Briar Cliff, our first, batch of students are coming this weekend. And so it's all like really beginning now. And so this is, if we haven't been doing it up to this point, now is the time to really double down and refocus our efforts as we prepare for whatever is going to come in these next weeks and months.
Yeah, absolutely. Two things that, based on what you were just saying. One, I'm so happy I was muted when you said you got to look out for number one or you step in number two, because that got me. I was laughing really hard. But that's a great phrase. Yeah, very, very good visual. I glad I was muted for that second, because I lost it. That was great. And also, I would agree. We have someone out there, Rebecca Tom, says, very well
Rebecca,
said.
how's it going? Rebecca's awesome.
Love it. So I forgot to mention before I throw that out. If you have questions or comments or anything, share them here. We'll toss you in the stream. We won't want to just go off the things I have to ask. I want to hear from all of you. So if you're out there watching, got things to ask, please throw it out right here. But anyways, another thing I was thinking of is I really appreciated what you said about young adults plugging into people all the time, like constantly like looking for that space for that where they can learn and adapt and grow. I think that puts a lot of if you've never thought about that in that way, I've not thought about it in that way, so it's a good visual for me. But when you think about that, how important that is, those interactions. I think that that raises the bar of interaction when you're interacting with young adults, and you're, like you mentioned, practicing self care yourself, because people follow what they see, not what they, they want to see what you're, how you're living, how you're doing things, what you're doing, and how those play out. So in regards to that, have you had like some of these young people or adults, kids, whatever? That I know you work with the whole gamut. So,
Mm-hmm.
but have you had anyone just say like come to you and share some of the things that they've been dealing with as stressors during this time? Because I think when you're talking about wellness and well-being, it's hard to think about our wellness and well-being when we're feeling like it's scary to get outside, it's scary to go
Mm-hmm.
exercise, it's scary to go to the store to buy food. Like how I wonder how you what kind of things people have brought up to you and what you have for thoughts for those people who might be dealing with some of those things.
Sure. I think one of the worst things we did as a linguistically, I guess, as a nation is at the very beginning we started talking about social distancing. I don't think that was always the wrong language to be using, and it still is. I think we never needed to be distant socially. This time called for us to be closer socially. We needed some physical distance, and that's true. So physical proximity, sure, we needed to learn how to be with ourselves in our own space, and I think that that's honestly one of the things that's the most frightening for people. And so when you ask like what are people dealing with, they're dealing with themselves. And so like if we take like the drink the truth serum or take the truth pill or whatever it is and get to the real heart of why this is so hard, at the real heart of it, it's not what's out there, it's what's in here, because we're being forced to confront ourselves, our families, our kids, all those forces that for all of our lives we've been allowed to shove it out, push it out the door for the majority of the day. And now it's all right in our laps. And so I think that if we're really honest with ourselves, the hardest part of all this is ourselves. And that's where we have to, and going back to the first question about self-care, this is exactly why we need to double down and really triple down on taking care of ourselves. So I think that's I think at the heart of it, one of the hardest things I hear from people is about feeling isolated in the beginning anyway, not so much anymore in the summer, because honestly, in America, things have been mostly open. And so I don't think it's the same as it was in the beginning. And the attitudes have maybe shifted a little or a lot, depending on where you are. But in the beginning, for sure, I think there was a lot of feeling of just not knowing how to connect with anybody, and just being in like not just the figurative, but the literal bubble of isolation. And I think that's in fear. And so I'm reading a book right now, and I love Marianne Williamson. She's one of my favorite people out there in the world, and she has a book, Return to Love, and everything she talks about in there, it's either like love or fear, and like it all kind of boils down to that. And we always have this opportunity in every single moment to really to answer that question. Are we going to respond with love, or are we going to react with fear? And so I think that in the beginning, what I also was hearing a lot more in the beginning was, so much uncertainty created so much anxiety. And so I think that, and that anxiety, when put between four walls, created a lot of stress and a lot of tension in people's households. And I think I even said it a few minutes ago. I was like the quote, like, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. I think that I'm a father. I have 3 kids at home. I was working, living, doing it all, the homeschooling, all that stuff last spring, trying to teach my own students online, and just trying to navigate all that like everybody else. And it's really hard. And I think that it's shone a light on everything that is beautiful about our family, about our love that we have for each other. But it also, like I was saying a second ago, it put a light too on all those things where we really struggle. And that's been hard. And so I think that's another thing, a common theme amongst not so much amongst the kids, but amongst the adults, is like how hard it is to be a parent all the time. It's like I've made the joke often before the pandemic that I'm a way better parent for in these 3-hour bursts that I usually get during the school year, like when I have to be a parent in the morning and then be a parent in the evening. And thank goodness for all our school teachers and educators and coaches who are doing that real grunt work during the day, because we all learned a lot of very fundamental things during the spring. And one, it's like how hard it is to be a teacher, and like what miracle workers teachers are to not only deal with my kid who can be a little, what, but a whole room full of those kids at any given moment. So it's so God bless them. And now moving forward, and that kind of leads me to just I'll end here or stop here, is to say now what I'm hearing, because we're doing a lot of work with educators and school districts and things like that, is there's just, again, it's about uncertainty, it's about fear and not knowing what's going to come. We've spent so much time focusing on returning to learn just to get to the starting line, but so little time having a real national dialogue, and certainly in more local levels dialogues about what it's going to look like once we actually open the doors and are in classes. And just by the nature of what's going to happen, we're going to start to see more spread of coronavirus. And it's going to happen just because we're going to have 50 million or whatever, however many million kids going out into the population like they've never, and interacting like they haven't in the last 7 months. So how are we going to deal with that as a people, as families, as individuals? It's going to come, whatever we'll learn more about the disease and infection rates and the science of it all. That's going to come. That'll come with time. But how we deal with it, and how are we prepared for when it's going to come a lot closer to home in these next few months? I do have that fear, and that's my own fear, but it's also one that I hear from others.
Yeah, I've been hearing some of the same things from students, especially. Just like you mentioned it earlier, it might be harder on young people right now, because right now it's like they're especially as they're coming into college, or they're sophomores, juniors, seniors, looking to exit, or any other institution of further learning. They're thinking about like, what does that look like for me to step out? Like, is there going to be work? Is there going to be, they don't know what that looks like. And that's a scary prospect when you're coming in as a first year student or a sophomore who got one semester of what the normal experience was like.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're stepping into the next 2 years, 3 years, now knowing like this is the new normal. I think that's going to be incredibly interesting to see, but not in like the good way. I think it'll be very hard for students. That's the experience I've heard, not just for college, high school students, and for people in those communities who employ students. It's because if there's a college in the town, you probably have a lot of student workers somewhere around.
Sure.
So, and something you said here before I move on to my next question, something you said really resonated with me, because it reminded me very clearly of what one of our other guests said a few, months back now. Crazy. June was months ago. That's gross. But he said, like, right now, a lot of this stuff that we're dealing with, both the racial stuff, the global pandemic, all these other things, it's like because of that pandemic, we're the things that we used to use to distract ourselves are gone. There's no sports. There's no, there's no movies releasing. There's no new this, that, or the other that people are clamoring for. And as you said, we're stuck kind of in our own experience with ourselves. And I'll tell you what, I will agree. It's I was a much better parent in those little bursts than I think I've become with our two girls. But you learn, you adapt, and it's been wonderful and incredibly difficult all at the same time. But I was just thinking what you said is like, that's totally the same thought process. Is like, it has been hard because we have had this opportunity to be introspective and experience ourselves in a way that we haven't before, because I am very good at distracting myself from anything. And there's just all those opportunities. You can't go out and meet someone to go grab coffee. You can't go out to go bowling or go to the movies. Like I said, like it's very interesting. And you mentioned the impact of educators, and you are one of those educators. But you also mentioned, and I know that you're also a coach, and you're someone who cares about wellness and well-being. So with all of that in mind, how I mean, how have you remained, you personally, Ryan, how have you remained resilient? Like, you had all your students have to, I'm assuming it's the same as it was here, left for spring break, didn't come back. Uh, and in March, you had to deal with being a small business owner, co-owner, and have kind of everything get shut down. And you were probably still coaching at the time, and now you've got to think ahead to coaching. Like, how have you specifically remained resilient? You are in three realms that have been hit incredibly hard by the pandemic.
Well, the honest answer is like, look at my. I'll show you right there. I haven't been get. That's how I've been getting along. It's not. I don't. I think I try to. It's practice. You know what I mean? I think the answer to everything is practice. So when I'm the healthiest, it's when I'm practicing the most, and that means like for me, getting up early in the morning and meditating, going for a walk, lifting weights. Reading. I mean, like the things that bring like doing yoga, meditating, yoga nidra, like those things, those practices that those charge me. And then certainly being able to get outside with and be with my kids and to we just had baseball season. So to be able to play baseball, play catch, that's one of my favorite things still as like an old dude. That's like I could still go out and like even though I have like total bad elbow and every part of my body hurts when I do it. I still could play catch all day, just like when I was a kid. And so I'm still that way. And to me, those have been the things that have been sustaining. It's like just a doubling back down into myself and really trying to use the time, which has been hard because, again, when my kids were gone, like, I did a lot of work from home before the pandemic and I was super productive. That all got really challenged when my kids were home. That was the difference when I can do a lot of things when there's not three kids screaming and running around and then they have to be educated themselves, like it was a lot always going on. And so moving forward, I think
Yeah,
it's
I don't
all.
know how you did it having to. Oh, sorry. I was saying I don't know how you did it teaching. Our kids are young, and I'm like it's hard already. I don't know how you did it having to teach and do your stuff on top of it. Bless your heart.
I got to give credit to my lovely wife, Megan. I think she really is much more than I, to be completely fair and honest. She's much more of my kids' primary educator in the homeschool process. I mean, I'm there, I'm supportive, I'm doing what I can when I can, but honestly, most of the work, she was the one. And then two, to be fair to my kids who are awesome about it too, like they're really good students. And, even when we struggled, like the struggles were manageable. And, one of my sons, he was like always, I mean, he thrived during it all because he just is like, he was just ready to like, wanted to get done, knew that he could get done, wanted to get done with his work. And then he could go do kind of what he wanted to do. And so, I mean, I don't think it was all a loss all the time. It wasn't all hard all the time. There was some, again, like the best of times, seeing like so much resilience in my kids, how they could just like struggle, but then like bounce back. And that's what we can learn so much about resiliency through just looking and loving kids. It's that because you stare at or you experience how they experience things. And it's so big, so much, so in the moment. But then, if something you can change the dialogue or give them an intervention that sends them the other way, then also the next moment, everything can be okay or close to it. You know what I mean? So it is, working with kids, it's the highs and the lows for sure. But from that, we can learn within ourselves, like how to be resilient, how to bounce back, how to like shake it off and just say like, I always like with my kids, it's like one of those numbers, like and just you have to hit the reset button. We all have in our family, we have reset buttons on. So it can be like, that's your reset button. You want to push your reset button. And then it's like, you start over again.
I'm stealing that one. I need that. I need that in our house.
We all need that one.
Just no, it's funny. My daughter is 3.5, almost 4, and she is the most strong-willed person I've ever met. And I know me, and I thought it was going to be not that bad, but she
should hang out with my son Liam. He's 9 and almost 10, and Liam means strong-willed warrior. So it's like we named the kid. I don't know why we named him that because we get it every day. So I'm with you.
Well, we'll have a fun party and see who cracks eventually. Both
That's
of you
right.
probably, but no. But she even in that moment, she was like, if like you said, something wasn't going her way, it was total meltdown. All of a sudden, she's like, bam, gone out in the backyard to go play. I'm like, all right, okay, you can turn it off that easily. That's something I should learn how to do because she just stopped being grumpy right away, and I was like, I know I've been in the midst of this, been grumpy sometimes, and yeah, golly, that's a great observation, Ryan. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're all telling ourselves stories, and just kids have so much more power and the ability to change and actually control the narrative that actually serves them much better than adults. Much better than adults, because we're just hanging on to the same old stories, and everything kind of reaffirms what we just
Mm-hmm.
what's going to make us feel bad all the time, or feel bad a lot of the time. And that's because it's all the all the self-loathing, all the when we really talk about deeper seated issues emotionally, and where people are really really hurting, it's it's again, it's about that fear of what it would actually be to love ourselves, and to know that it's all within us. We're so, I mean, one of the things we always try to teach in yoga nidra and in our yoga practices is just how much power we all have within us. And that when you can learn to be aware of your body and aware of your breath, you, with that awareness comes all sorts of insights into things that we can just never really, we don't have any real way to have an experience of until you've done those things. It's like we can't have the conversation. I think of like the part in the Matrix where you have to eat the pill. And I can't remember what the color of the pill is, but when you eat the pill, then you and that's and you can't ever go back. And I think that that's kind of what it is. Once you learn how to engage with yourself and be with yourself and feel yourself and what's going on in the moment and get to the real heart in your experiential life, that's the feeder to your emotional life, which is the feeder to all your behavior, which is the feeder to how you perform, like how you exist and be in the world, whether you're successful or unsuccessful or happy or sad or however you want to, whichever way the wind blows. But we have this power within us to, once we get to the real heart of why we, like, what makes us tick and why we do what we do, at the heart of it, it's like where we're struggling, there's pain there. There's hurt. We're hurting. Like, and this is and it's probably rooted in things that happened to us when we were kids, and like just how we grew up and how we lived our life and how we had experiences. Some on whatever spectrum of extremity it was, from what we call like normal childhood experiences, which what is that, to very much like cumulative complex trauma, or childhood trauma, wherever our life is on that spectrum. Like we still, once we can gain that insight, that power into ourselves and tap in, it's like opening Pandora's box in the most beautiful way. Because when we do that, we see, I think of the line, it's when the doors of perception, it's like the Aldous Huxley line, I think, or maybe it was William Blake, I don't know. When the doors of perception are cleansed, we see the world for how it truly is, infinite. And that's us. When we cleanse our perception of who we really, and get to the sense of who we really are, we're magnificent. And that's where we can do anything, and we can manifest. And that's really, I think, when I love like the APA like defines resilience as it's rooted in like this notion of being able to bounce back. And I think that's legit. I think that is part of it. It's like being able to pick yourself up when you get knocked down. I mean, I think that that's something to it, but it's deeper than that. I think it's the heart of resilience is being the ability to see yourself for who you really are. And when I do that, I see myself in you and everybody else. And that's where like all the conflict, there's no need for any more conflict with myself or with others or with anything. And it changes our perception from trying to value a world, or like a world that values people more than a world that values things. And that's the world we're living in now, where, I mean, that's what I was talking about earlier about, like with isolation and feeling alone and like having to be with ourselves. that's what's hard about it. Because when we get to it, we have to like cross that threshold of all the self-doubt, all the self-loathing, all the numbing that we've done in our lives to keep us from having to confront who we really are. Like, here we are, we're at that threshold, and it's time. And this is the universe, this pandemic, all of it. I mean, this is I mean, maybe this is my own belief system. You know, this is the world this is the universe talking to us. And we better listen and do something about it. And the idea that returning, see, this is where even too our language and how we're talking about things is very problematic right now as a culture, because we're talking about the notion that when we return to learn, for example, like going back to schools, that like that's going back to normal. It wasn't normal before the pandemic. We weren't serving our young people. You know what I mean? Like, problems were everywhere. And this idea that we're like going back to that is somehow the new gold standard. Like, we got to do better. We missed a golden opportunity in March when we all went away. Like, I wish that the powers that be could have granted out all this money that is at their disposal, like they did for other things, to different educators and systems and districts to start trying out all sorts of different models. And we could have had this moment, and it's going to come to us one way or the other, because it's going to be forced upon us now, and we're going to have less control over it. But you're going to see in this next 6 months to a year to 2 years, I believe, because of the pandemic, regardless of what happens moving forward, a lot of innovation and a lot of creativity about new ways to deliver content, new ways to connect. One of the things we learned in our springtime about the school experience is number one, it's really hard dealing with our kids. And number two, that in reality, the amount of content, the amount of curriculum that's actually being delivered in a school day is not the length of a full school day. And so, like, if you're, say, for example, a fourth grade or something, and you're getting like 3 hours worth of content, well, they're at school for a lot longer. So what are we doing in that time? And it gets to really a lot of the social emotional skills. Like, what are we teaching? And we know so much more about, long-term health and wellness, that your emotional intelligence is way more important to your long-term health and happiness than your cognitive intelligence. And so this is the time for a real reimagining of education, I believe, to really focus on emotional intelligence, because, like I was saying a second ago, that's what we know drives behavior. And why do so many teachers have so many kids have so many issues in schools? Because their behavior is the language. They can't talk, so they behave. They have a behavior. And we have to totally reframe our experience in the classroom to meet that reality, or else we're just going to keep pumping out Model Ts like we've been doing for the last, like our educational system was built on, to make good factory workers. And unless we're sending all our kids off to other countries where all our manufacturing is, that's not going to sustain our economy moving forward. So this is a real time. It's a real opportunity for us to really invest in education and invest in young people, because they're gonna plant, that's the seed planted for the rest of us for a good long while.
Awesome. I'm going to toss this up here before I throw a couple other things out.
Sure.
Rebecca said that learning to incorporate her children into her new normal helped her as much. And then
Sure.
What you just said, Rebecca's all in today. She gave some of these.
That's awesome.
But I heard a lot in what she said. I mean, there's I'm gonna have to re-listen to this later to catch all of it again. But a couple things that I thought of here is like that I just wanted to affirm for anyone listening to is like I agree with you totally, Ryan. It's like to show that love for yourself is so difficult, because you know yourself, and you can find, and to have to accept that part of yourself is very difficult. And I think that's something that we're discovering more and more now, is like like you said, we're stuck with ourselves. We have to figure out what it is that what other people find value in us, because we don't, because of, like you said, the stories we tell. I think that's why we do Voices of Resilience, because it's about stories, it's about sharing, it's about putting a new narrative together but you do that all the time. Your internal story is becomes your reality. I use this example with students a lot when I was in higher ed, and just the people I work with still. It's like, do you have, if you leave something in absence, like if you text someone and they don't text you back, do you just let that be and not be okay, or do you start making up a story? Are they mad at me? Are they, did I do something wrong? Like, and then you've built up this whole story in your head, like, oh my gosh, it's probably because I didn't invite them to coffee the other day when I could have, and I didn't. Oh my god! And then you find out they just didn't have their phone. It's like the stories we tell are so impactful, and so I want to. Like I said, you said it, and I just wanted to bring it back around one more time. It's like, think about the stories you're telling yourself, not just the ones that are true. The ones that might be true, but think about what's in that absence of truth. Catch yourself making that story. Catch yourself what you're doing, because that's going to affect every aspect of what you're doing. And I also, I literally am starting to work on writing a little blog post for our newsletter about never wasting a good crisis. And you just I'm just going to copy what you said and just toss it in there and just pretend like I wrote it. It'll be great. But I think that you're spot on. Like, there's been a lot of opportunities in this crisis, and I would not say I'm thankful for a pandemic, but I am thankful for the opportunity it's given us all to think about the world and the way we do things differently. And I'm hopeful. I'm excited and hopeful that we're going to see a whole new focus on interactions with other people, because for a long time I was saying I worked pretty closely with students, with you know supervising them over 10 years, and it seemed like each year we got a little more distracted and separated because of technology, and didn't engage in the same way, and all of a sudden everything is fallen apart. And now it's like, oh, being around those people, that was a big deal. That was a good thing for me to be around. So I I'm hopeful as well in this time, Ryan. I'm glad you said something about it. And I was just wondering for you as well, because I know you'll have great thoughts on this, and I know you've actually thought about it already, but you've talked. You're going to be in the classroom again. You're going to be, like you said, this return to learn, as you said. You're going to be back in the classroom, teaching young adults, educating them. How how are you going to be able to, like, I mean, we're in I don't even know what the university experience is going to look like when we come back, and that's just one example, but we're focusing on it because I think there's going to be a lot of pointed stuff that comes around in that environment that will have ripple effects throughout cities, communities, regions, and the country. But we're dealing with, like you said, a pandemic, racial injustices that have come about that we're dealing with as a country. Like, we've got an election year, we've got all sorts of stuff that's coming to a head here, and it's going to crash course right with our students that are out there in across the country, our young adults. So you've talked to me about equality versus equity, and so I want to know how you think about tying that all into what you're doing with your work and in the classroom, and focusing in on creating equity for students, and equality. Like, how do you find, what's your balance there? Like, what's the difference between equity and equality for what you're doing, and how do you find that balance? And what do you perceive is coming your way? I guess that's part of it too. Is like, I think it's going to be a really interesting year for a lot of things, and I'd love to hear your take on it.
I think we're going to see is the need for what we've always had a need for, but you're going to see the clearest expression of it come out because of the pandemic, and that's the need for multiple pathways, an understanding of multiple pathways to learning. And so we've always needed to differentiate learning for our students and differentiate instruction as teachers in order to meet individual student needs. But because of just the system, the way it is, like the assembly line kind of mentality, or not, culture of education, is that it's kind of a one size fits all. And I think that what we're going to see is a need for a lot more flexibility in the classroom, because it's going to kind of be forced upon us. There's going to be students who are going to be in the classroom. There's going to be students who are going to get sick and they're going to test positive and they're going to be out of the classroom. And it's like, learning can't shut down when that happens. We have to still be able to meet the diverse needs of our students and our own needs, in our families and whatnot, in the midst of all of this. And so I think, so to your question about like where equity and equality come in, I think equality is kind of the standard that we want it all to be equal and to have equal access and all those things to all services and all the tiers of structure and support and whatnot. And that's all true. But equity is really our pathway to equality, because we have to be able to differentiate based on individual needs. And so we're going to have different pockets of learning that are going to be that are probably going to need to happen in lots of different ways. And we're going to need to be really open to that. And so this is our path. This is our time. Like you said, never waste a good crisis. The crisis is the opportunity to really reimagine how we interact with students in the classroom. And so it's going to certainly, I think, even though I know I'm guilty of this myself, like the sage on the stage, like days are pretty much over. And those where it's, lecture based and like I'm supposed to just, as a college professor anyway, like I can just say it out loud and and just expect that my students are going to get it. That's just not the pathway for most individuals. For some it is, but for most it's not. And so we're going to have to find ways to reach students, and we're going to have to find, and that means meeting them where they are to try to get them to where we want them to be. And so where are they? Well, they're going to have to be, they're already in technology. So we're going to have to use apps and use different, learning software, to learning management software to engage students and to track their progress and all that stuff, and get really good and comfortable with that, so that they can, like, when they're plugging into us, it doesn't feel like if it's a hassle to us, it's going to be a hassle to them. So it's like, whether I like my learning management system or not, that's not really up to, like, it's not my place to complain to students on that front. You know what I mean? Like, complaints should go up, not down, And so I think that that's all part of it too, is we have to really check ourselves before we wreck ourselves as educators, to make sure that we're not muddying the water too much and kind of our negativity, our fear is coloring things too much, because that's going to stand in the way of what the individual learner needs. So I think that maybe is not the answer to the question that you asked, but I think equity is about individual, equality is about more communal. And I think that this is going to be our call to really serve the differentiated needs of our students in ways, honestly, that K through 12 gets a lot better than higher ed gets. So K through 12 is definitely already having this conversation and have been having it for a very long time, almost everywhere. But I don't think it's not a real conversation that I hear amongst my colleagues or in other places, and colleagues, in my own institution or in others that I know and connect with around the country as well. So, I mean, I think this is a real eye-opening affair. And I think, like, so for example, like I'm teaching a multicultural, it's called Multicultural Voices. It's a English Lit course in the fall. And so when the events with George Floyd happened, Breonna Taylor happened. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. That's my hometown. I mean, when I'm talking to my people I know back home, like, my home's on fire and there's a lot going on in the world. I felt like, so part of what that means for me as an educator is to think about my place of privilege and where I sit in the classroom and the type of power dynamic that's there. And in a diverse learning environment like Briar Cliff is, where we have students from all walks of life and every race and everything in between, every race and sexuality and gender and need, ability, every type of, identification one could think of. Like, there was a real need to think about, from my point of view, like, as the one who's going to teach about multiculturalism through the lens of literature, it seemed like a real opportunity. And talking to my, multicultural programming director and others at our university, kind of said, like, maybe my class should focus on African-American literature and African-American film and take, instead of doing a broad, kind of more survey approach, maybe we should take this as an opportunity to drill down a little bit deeper and to offer our students something that we don't normally get to offer to small college like ourselves. And so that's what I'm going to do. And I've had a really great collaboration with different individuals on our campus to create like what I think is going to be an awesome 4-week block experience for our students. But it's about, I think that's what and within that, I'm going to have, again, students who are in, students who are out. It's a hybrid course. So some days we're going to meet in person. Some days we're going to meet on Zoom, synchronous, asynchronous. I think being open to all of that, even though it's going to be a little jarring, I think we have to create all these different paths. And so to me, that's the key to equity, is like being mindful of who you're talking to and what the circumstance and the context of the times are, and then doing something about it. You know, I could sit and just still do, you know, the syllabus that I had planned before, but it seemed like that would have been, even though it was awesome and it would have been a lot of fun, it would have been a great class, it seemed like it's like not capturing the zeitgeist, not capturing the spirit of the times. And that seems like that's part of what it means to be equitable in the classroom as one who sits in a seat of power.
That's awesome. I wanted to share this image really quick here. One moment, if I can find it. Here we go. Because it's something that someone shared with me recently.
Yeah, I've seen this one.
I thought it was very good. And it was the difference between inequality, equality, equity, and then justice. You know, I think that I can't claim that I am the one who found this. I can't pretend that would be a lie. I don't want to lie to you.
Yeah, I've seen this one too. There's also a really good one, and one where everybody's at a fence and they're like looking over at a ball game, and some people are standing on a box, and there's different heights of the boxes, and it's all the same idea though.
Yeah, it's a good visual though. If you haven't had it, if someone is watching now or later, and you're looking, and you're like, it's hard to process some of these things because they seem similar on the surface unless you dig down a little deeper. You know, Ryan,
we're even just, if I could say one. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. I will.
No, I was just going to say one other thing about equity and equality. I mean, I think it merits saying. I think it's really the understanding too of why or what the difference is between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. All Lives Matter is a very, you know, it's about equality, and certainly all lives matter. There's no question or debate by any. I don't think I've ever heard anybody debate that. But where it's, for some reason, there's a debate is maybe a lack of understanding that all lives can't matter until all those different individuals who make up all matter. And so there can be no all lives mattering until Black lives matter, until LGBTQ plus lives matter, until, you know, women's, you know, gender equality in salary distribution and in hiring equity exists. There can be no like matter. You know what I mean? Like all of those things have to, we have to bring our focus and our attention in all these these differentiated ways to think about where power has served and not served our populace if we're going to move forward in a moral, just world, and certainly a country, a society. And so it's big time work, and it's why we all do, I think, what we do.
Yeah, and I was going to say my friend Bonnie, who was on here back in June, right after everything happened with George Floyd, and shared his heart with us, which was wonderful. He said he thinks that the hashtag should have been just a little longer. He said it should have been Black Lives Matter as much, because that's what we're talking about. It's like people, it's like you said, all lives. Yep, no one's debating that lives matter. It's the debate about, you know, it's that it's like someone said that all houses matter, you know, like, but my house is on fire. But all houses matter. Like, you put the house that's on fire out, you deal with the issue, and then you focus on the other pieces. I was like, that's a really good visual, because it's like, well, my house. But what about my house? Shouldn't the firemen come to my house? Is your house on fire? No, but my house matters. It's like, ooh, it's kind of on the nose, but it hits very, very clearly. You know what I wanted to ask here, just as we're wrapping up here, is I think it's a two-parter. So I'll throw out two things, and then we'll get us wrapped up here after you share. But one is, if you have any resources for people to consider and process, what would those be? But two, I think we've seen it on a grander scale, but I really think it's going to, specifically for you and those people in the environment of higher ed and education. I really think we've seen a trending. There's no hard data on it, so it's all anecdotal in my mind, just based on what I've seen. But I feel like mental health concerns have risen because of the isolation, because of the fear, this constant trauma, as you mentioned, and this persistent thing that they're dealing with. So I guess I first perceive pretty heavily that college campuses, especially, are going to really see an influx. So my question for you would be, what pieces of advice would you give to students coming in who might be coming in for the first time to help deal with those those stressors that they might be facing, and mental wellness that they can develop? And then the other one was, if you have any resources to share, what would those be?
Sure. I think the most, it kind of goes back to your very first question, I think, or maybe the first thing we talked about taking care of yourself. I mean, I think that at the heart of, so in a very practical way, taking time every day to have a routine, and to have a routine of self-care where one can, and whatever that looks like, where you can essentially forget yourself for a little bit. For a lot of people, that might be like going for a run, playing some pickup basketball. Like, I don't know what it is exactly, like kind of whatever is your bliss. It could be knitting, something that gets you out of yourself and allows you to kind of be something that you can kind of get lost into. I think that that's, for anybody, that's a great thing. And because we need that opportunity for us to get out of fight or flight, to get our brains from activation and being hyper aroused, or hypo aroused, and into more of some stasis, some balance. I think that if this is the opportunity to take, thankfully my university, I get to teach, I mean, I'm in the English department, but I get to teach yoga and meditation courses for our kinesiology department. So if there's any courses like that, I know through our that department, we offer like stress management courses. We offer things in like CPR and first aid, and other things, like courses that are going to get you some life skills that you can take as a college student, that are going to, again, help you learn how to manage all of what's going on, and still give you like real legit credit. So it's like not like you're just doing it for nothing. So I think those are a couple things, like being really smart about what you sign up for. And then also remembering, I think this is as much for the educators who might be listening too, is just remembering that the first 6 weeks, especially, maybe the first half of the semester, maybe it's even the first couple of weeks because of what's going to be going on, it's really just about kind of getting through it. And I think that I don't know how much favor I win by saying this, but I think it is true. I don't even really see myself as an English professor anymore. I'm an emotion coach who does my coaching through literature or yoga, depending on like who I'm hanging out with and what the audience is. But it's really like at the heart of it, that's what it is. And I think like now we need to remember that. We need to show a lot of love and have a lot of grace for our students. Even if we think they might be like gaming the system, it's like love and grace. We just got to give everybody a lot of love and a lot of grace. And for the individual, give yourself that. And know that if you're like, these are the times to reach out, to connect. And like, I know for a fact, one of the reasons we want kids to go back to school is because this is the place where they can get resources. So we're talking about like what students can do. They can certainly reach out to the resources. For some individuals who have gone back home, there's no access to mental health care. Well, on a college campus, there is. So use that. If your university's offering yoga classes or gets to bring me in and work with Lost&Found and do some yoga nidra, like that's what we need to do, is we need to have experiences where we rest and relax, where we restore ourselves, because we don't know what's going to happen on the outside, but we know on the inside we need to preference that. So that's the, I guess, part, maybe one of the parts of the answers. The other part, as far as resources to share, I'm not trying to like bail out on the answer here, but this is really my honest answer. The number one resource to share is yourself, is to be there. Like, humans need humanity. So the number one thing we need to do with one another is connect and get over this idea that we can still be social and be physically apart from each other. and that when we have those moments of connection, we need to just remind ourselves that how much moments matter. And so the greatest resource is ourselves for one another. It's to be, like, I teach at a Franciscan university. I love St. Francis. And so it's like this idea of being brother and sister to the world. And so everything is relational. Everything is familial. And so when we can, as a resource, we can view ourselves that way. We can view our brothers and sisters that way. We're going to do great things. So that's one part. That's, I guess, one part of the answer. I guess now, and then from a practical sense, resources to share would be the experts that you have on campus. But then even, if you want to dive deeper into like what we do and kind of the interest that we have, I mean, certainly check us out at livinglumen.com. But from like books to read, Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score is what so much of what we do is based on, and how trauma lives, but also resilience lives in the body. Excuse me. Excuse me. And so that's a real fundamental text to us. I also love, again, we are practitioners of Yoga Nidra. So I love Yoga Nidra. It's a practice of conscious sleep. So it's the practice of bringing oneself into deeper states of the brain, to where you can restore yourself, you can talk to yourself, and you can have a different dialogue of awareness with yourself and with sensation in your body, that I think is really, again, the key to feeling yourself and knowing yourself as a resource. So there's a lot of great Yoga Nidra practices on YouTube. It's really at the heart of it is body scanning. So just Google or YouTubing, like 10-minute body scans, 5-minute body scans, Yoga Nidra practices, and that's Nidra, not ninja, although that can kind of be something too. So those are great practices and great resources. That's stuff that I do when I have 5-10 minutes. I try to do these types of practices myself, and so these are amazing resources. For educators out there, there's a book called Breathe Chill that's really, really great, and it's about how to take a lot of these yoga, meditation, mindfulness practices to young people. And so that's a really, really great book as well. So those are a couple that are kind of our go-tos in our library that we always try to share when we get an opportunity to plug something.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan, for your time and for your insight. And just as we say every week, if you are someone in need and just don't have nowhere to connect, feel free to reach out to us at Resilient Today. We're on Instagram, Facebook. You can email us. You can email info@resilienttoday.org, and that'll get to our team here. But if you're in crisis, look for someone in your area. But if you're interested in the work we're doing, if you're finding value in these conversations and you want to just engage more with myself, with Ryan, with other speakers we've had, don't hesitate to reach out. We want to get you connected. We want to help. We're very passionate about building resiliency in young adults, and we have a lot of people like Ryan that work with us who are as passionate, if not even more so than us sometimes. And that's our whole. That's what we're here for. And like I said, we'd love to live in a space where we don't, where it's just part of everyone's daily conversation about how they're taking care of themselves and others. And we're happy to explore options. If you want a chapter on your campus, if you want to be connected to our resources, just reach out. We want to help. We are here. We are here to help. We are here to support those in need, and we're here to support people who aren't in need but might be in need someday. We want to build those skills on the front end, so when those hardships come, we're ready to rock and roll. So like I said, I thank you so much, Ryan. And Ryan, thank you for not just your time, but your insights. And, I want to reiterate one more time that importance of self-care. I've been working for, many, many years. And finally, I'm like building into my schedule time to like do something to like work out and stuff. And I have been very guilty of not doing that. So those of you watching who are maybe in college, those of you who are watching who are in your 60s, it doesn't matter. Build that time out for self-care. I think Ryan emphasized those reasons very clearly. So we're thankful to work with you, Ryan. We're thankful for this time together. And those of you watching, we'll be back next week, next Thursday, with Lucas Kanicki, who's going to talk about wellness and well-being in a different format from the more the physical wellness part of things. But they all tie together, and so we want to balance it all out. So like I said, I appreciate you coming here, Ryan, and sharing with us.
Nathan, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you all out there listening. Please reach out, get some help, help others. Peace.
Awesome. Well, you all have a great day, and we'll see you on Thursday.